Hello friends, and welcome to you with video number 3 of our series Flutter and PostgreSQL. First of all, thank you for watching this video, and I hope you support me by subscribing to my channel. And if you do like this video, please hit the like button. In previous video, I missed to tell you one small details, but it's an important detail actually. When you develop the application in an external device such as a mobile phone, you need to let this mobile able to access also to the database. One of the things that you need to do is you let the device to access the firewall also. So the firewall, you need to let this device be able to access it, and the way to do that is that you add the two connections to your network gateway and to the Wi-Fi gateway. So both of them you need to also add to your firewall rules, so you can let your external device, in this case as I said the mobile phone, to access to your device and to your database. And you can tell what are the details of this or by just IP add, and here you will see that the LAN connection have this value and the Wi-Fi connection have this value. Okay, now this having said that, let's start with our video. As I said that in the previous video, I will not go through details of the user interface because this is out of the scope of this video. We will just focus on the database section. Here the application starts with the main page, which is the login page. So this is the main, which is the first class, the entry point to your application. This goes to my app class, which is a stateless widgets, extended stateless widgets, and then this one takes us to my app design. My app design is also a stateless widget. We are not using any stateful widget because there is no any changes in the state. This my app design will return a material app. This material app we will initialize the initial route, which is the login, which is this page, and then there are a secondary route. These secondary routes are the 3 pages that we have said about before. We will create 3 pages for this application: the login, the register, and the account. Each one have its own routing or navigation value, in this case /login, /register, and /account. So whenever you click on any hit this link here, we will move to the register page. If we hit back, we move back to the login page. So this way, by using these navigation values, we can move back and forth in our application. Now let's move on to the first thing, which is registering. As we have said, that the user usually start with the registration, then with the login, and then with the update his or her account details. First, we create a register class that extends status widget. Then this will take us to a register page. This register page extends stateful widgets. Now this is obvious because whenever a user enters new data here, the state of this page will be changing. The state, that's why we are extending the stateful widget. In the state object class, we will extend this single ticker provider state mixin, which will give us this feature of the double tab feature, controlling this double tab. We create a list of tabs. We create 2 tabs in here, in our case buyer account and seller account, as obvious in here. Then we create a controller for this tab to control the movement of this tab. Now whenever the user enters data into these text fields, this data will be collected and sent to the database. This process will be handled by the global key, a global key. This global key will take an argument of form state, and we can create an object of this global key, one for the buyer account and one for the seller account. This will be responsible for collecting this data from this form, send it to the database. Next step is that we create a controller for each and every text field using the text editing controller. Next step is that we need to create a method. This method objective is that to keep track of any changes that happen in each and every text field. and then assign this value to a field. So each and every text field, we will make a method to keep track of any changes in that text field and assign the changed value to one field. Okay, creating all these methods to all these text fields. Now this thing, we will discuss about it down the road, not now. Now we need to initialize the tab controller and initialize the controller, add a listener to it. This listener will listen to the changes that happened in the text field. These changes are saved, as we said before, in these variables. So for each text field controller, we will add a listener and then add the value from that method correspond to that text field. Once we have done this step, then we need to dispose all the data that is within the text field. Once the data have been persisted and the state is changed, then we need to dispose these values. Now we enter to the design of this page. Now I will not go through the design because it's out of the scope of this course, and you can design the page the way you want. Or what is interested me is the section of the database, which comes in here. Now whenever a user hit or click the register button, the data will be collected and sent to the database. So how we can do this? Each button has some properties. One of these properties is a function by the name of onPressed. Whenever this onPressed is invoked by clicking on this register button, all the data here will be collected and sent to the database. Now we will create two methods, one for the buyer and one for the seller. So this one is for the buyer one, and we will do one for the seller as well, and we will take a look at how it will look like. So this is the method from the onPressed function. This is for the seller. Let's click on it. Here the real work that we are interested in, persisting the data to the database. The data from this form we will collect and send to the database using the global form key, in this case the seller global form key. First thing comes first. These three text fields need to be filled with data. We cannot keep any one of them empty, because these three text fields are important, are basic for the registration of any seller. So we need to make sure that none of these fields is empty. How we can do that? By validating using this method that all these three fields have been filled with data. So we will take this seller account form key dot current state dot method validate. This method, as I have said, will make sure that all these three fields are filled with data before we create the register or we click on the register. So once we click on the register, if any field is empty, in this case what will happen is this validation will fail and immediately will go down to another stage, which is here. If the validation is failed, we go to this else, which will change the state of this page. We will create a scaffold messenger that will take a snake bar argument, and in this snake bar we will show a note to the user that please fill all details, fill all fields with data. This is in case the validation has been failed. But if the validation has been successful, then we go back in here. If the validation is successful, that means we can start collect this data and send it to the database using this seller account global form key. Now there is one thing here. This is not related to the persistence process, but it's totally about hashing the password, which is a recommended way. before you send the password over the internet, you need to hash it. Now here, from here, we can start the process, the real process of persisting the data. As you remember in the first video, we said that we will do the persistence of the data in two ways. Either we use a model class or we use a DIO API. In these 2 or 3 videos, we will talk about using the model class, and afterward we will use the DIO if we have the time. The model class is an intermediate layer between the application and the database. So we will create a models users class for each and every step, that is the register, that is the login, that is the account. We will create methods to handle the data in such a way that for a new user there is a models or there is a method to register and persist the data, for a login to log in the user, for an update to persist the new updated data. So this is the model class, models users class. We will create for the registration 2 methods, one by the name of register new seller and one by the name of register new buyer. Now these 2 methods looks alike and they have the same objective: retrieve the data or collect the data from the form and pass it to the database. This is the objective of this class and these 2 methods. The only difference between them is that the number of the arguments. As you can see here in the seller, we have 3 text fields. That means we have 3 arguments. But with the buyer, we have 4 text fields. That means we have 4 arguments in this case. This is the only difference. Otherwise, they will do the same thing. They will do the same thing. Receive the data from the application and send it, forward it to the database. That's the only thing. So now we will talk about only the register new seller, and the register new buyer will be exactly the same. So I will focus on only on the register new seller. Now, once we have received the data, we need to pass it to the database. How we can pass it to the database? We create a class by the name of AppData. You can name it whichever name you wish, and this class also contains a method also to handle the data from each step, from the register step, from the login step, and from the update or the account update step. This is the class. This is the class, and we can start with the first method, the new register seller, the register seller, as we have seen in here. This method takes 3 arguments because we need to persist 3 things in the seller: the email, the password, and the phone number, the mobile number. So this method takes these 3 arguments, which we will collect from these 3 arguments. Okay, so this is the AppData method register seller, and these are the 3 values that we have received from the application. Now here comes the role or the time for using the Postgres API. The API that I have told you before, I have selected from many different APIs to use in the application to create a connection between the application and the database. First thing is that we create a connection. How we can create a connection? Now let's go here. Of course, first we need to add the link to this API, and then this is the syntax how we create a connection. This is the syntax how we create a connection. We put this connection in the constructor. Now why we put that in the constructor? Because every time we call this app database object, we will invoke, as you know from Java, we will invoke the constructor, and the constructor will start creating the connection for us. To avoid creating multiple connections, we will make some control in here. In case the connection equal null or the connection is closed, then we create a new connection. Otherwise, we will use the existing connection. So this is the way we will avoid creating duplicate or multiple connections. Now here, how to create a new connection. We will use this method from the Postgres API, which have this syntax, these parameters, these arguments. We need to fill them with data so we can create a new connection. The first one is the IP address. The second is the port. For Postgres is one port 5432. The database name that we have created in video number 2. Database admin, the user, the role, password. And here, as you can see, that's why I'm telling you this Postgres API is a very good one, because it also can give you the security, the SSL connection. But we will not go through this in this video because this will take us very far. We need to create certificates, and I will not go through this for the time being. But this is the general syntax for creating a new connection. Now remember one thing here. If you are developing your application using the AVD, the Google AVD, then you need to use this IP address 10.0.2.2. If you, on the other hand, if you're using your mobile phone, an external device like a mobile phone, then in this case you need to add either a domain name of your database. What is the domain name of your database? You need to add it here, or you add the IP address of your machine, of your server machine, of your laptop machine or desktop, whichever. You add it into here instead of this. If you're using the AVD, then you use this IP address. Now, how to create a connection object? The connection object we will create from these two things. From the Postgres API, we use this PostgreSQL connection. We create a connection object. Now, if you're wondering what is this question mark, this is related to the null safety, Flutter null safety, because I'm using Flutter 2 plus and I'm using the Dart 2.13, so there is something called the null safety, and I will not go through it for now. So we can create a connection object from this, and whenever you do any query, you get a result from that query. We also use this PostgreSQL result to create an object of a result, and by doing so we can create a connection. Now we have a connection. So now let's start registering a new seller. The first thing comes is that you use a trycatch. This is a very recommended way, is to use a trycatch block. So first thing, this is an asynchronous operation, so we need to use the await keyword, connection.open. If you're wondering what is this exclamation mark, this is also related to the null safety feature. So first of all, we open the connection, await connection.open, and then this connection, we use the transaction method. This transaction will give us a connection. We give it a name, whichever name suitable for you, and then we start another asynchronous operation. Here comes the normal SQL query. So this connection dot query. Now when you register a new user, first of all you make sure that this register or this new user is not registered before. So the first thing we need to check is that we need to check the email and in this case the mobile. We will check both of them. Are they registered or no? If they are registered, then we don't register and we inform the user that he's already registered. Otherwise we start the persisting of the new user credentials. So select star from my AppData. This is our table. We take this argument, this column, email DB, which take this parameter, named parameter. Named parameter usually is good because it protects us from the SQL injection. And then the other column, which is a mobile DB, which takes another parameter at mobile value. Now, this thing comes also from the Postgres API. This is related to the Postgres API. All this, actually, in fact, all this is coming from the Postgres API that we are using. So now we need to add the values of the named parameters. For each named parameter, we give it a value. Now the value comes from these values that we have been collected from the form. So the email value, we give it to this email parameter, we give it to this value from this, and the mobile parameter, we give it this mobile value, which takes from this. Now we will get, after the query, you will get a result. We will get a result, a PostgreSQL result, that is this one. Okay, now there are two things. Either the result succeed or fail. Either this user is registered or not registered. In case it is registered, then we return a value by a future value. A future value. This value, this method returns a future, a string future. We will talk now why we choose to make a future string future value. In case the user is already registered, so we will get a string future because this method returns a string future. We will write ALR. It's an abbreviation of already. You can choose whichever abbreviation you select. This future, string future, says that this user already registered. We will pass it to the model, because the model also take a future because it's an asynchronous, and this model returns also a string future, and this string future will go back to the register page, and here we will take this future. So the process is very simple. The model class, we take the values that we have collected from here, we pass it to the model take these values, pass it to the database will process these values and see, is this user registered? If it is registered, then I will get a future, string future, back again to the model, and from the model back to the register class, and it will be in this future. Because this is an asynchronous, then we use the then keyword. So this is the future. Now in this future we have a few options. Either the registration is successful, so we register the new user. In this case we set a new state, scaffold messenger, snack bar, we say registration successful, or the registration failed, we set a new state, snack bar, register failed, or another option, another state, which is already. In this case, if the register already registered, then scaffold messenger, snack bar, email already registered. That's why here in the database, if the user is registered, we return this future, and again in application we will get a snack bar here saying that this email is already registered. Now what if the user is not registered? In this case we will start persisting the new user using the same connection, the query and insert query, simple insert query. We use also named parameters, and then the result we will give it in another result object. Now one of the things that I like about this Postgres API is that it can give you the possibility that you add not just the three variables in here, you can add also more columns to or more values, more columns. Let's say in here, let's see in here, this is our database that we have created before. As you can see, it has column registration date DB, it has a role, it has an authentication ODB, and has a status DB and is seller DB. This is a boolean. Now if you look in here, we can hard code these columns in here, not only these 3 columns or these 3 text fields. We can add more fields into this query, which this field comes from these columns. This is one of the things that I like about this Postgres API. We can hard code them, and we can even hard code their values by assigning this name parameters. So these are the 3 basic values, and now we can add more values to these columns, and for each one we give it a hard-coded value. So for the status value, it's true, we add it, and role, we can make a string. Here we can give another data type, which is the date type, and here is the boolean. So as you can see, we can not only hard-code the new variables in our query, or in new parameters in our query, but also we can handle different types. That's one of the things that I like about this Postgres API. Now you might wonder, why do we need, how can we differentiate between a buyer registration and a seller registration? It's simple. We can add this boolean column, as we have added in here, is seller DB, which is a boolean, takes a boolean value default to false, and now we can hard code whenever a seller want to create a new account, then we hard code is seller to true. Okay, so now this query will be checked against the database, and it will be persisted, and we will get a result. Now this result, in case we will get a future from this result dot affected row count. If it's greater than 0, that means the registration is successful. We make an abbreviation by reg. If the registration failed for any reason, then we give NOP, so the registration failed. And here, as you have seen before, we have seen these options. The NOP means registration failed, and reg, which means the registration successful. So here, if the registration is successful, we make this, otherwise nope. Now there is another last one option. In case there was an exception happen with the connection, we couldn't get a connection, or we couldn't have a transaction. That's why I said it's much better to enclose this with a trycatch. If there is any exception happen, then we can give another option, another state, which is this future string by whichever letters you wish to add. In my case, I used exe. This we will pass it to the module, and the module will pass it to the class, register class, and then we will have a final here. If we have an error, we catch an error, and then we can say something went wrong. So we will show on the application this snake bar which says something went wrong. This in case you have an exception. That's why this is the way how you can handle all these states, all these options. If the registration failed, if it's not failed, if it's already registered. So that's how we can handle. Now for the buyer, we will do the same, exactly the same, except that, as we have said, there will be more fields, more parameters to our query, and we also can hard code other parameters into the query. So this is in general how we do the settings, or how do you do the registration of a new user and a new buyer. This is what's all about. In the next video we will start talking about the login process. Now if you if you had any benefit from this video, and if you like this video, I hope you subscribe to my channel and give me a like, and I appreciate for you. Thank you very much.